All right, we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Terry Yake. I'm a systems engineer for Aruba. I cover about a 3-state geography, North Dakota, Minnesota, and a sliver of western Wisconsin. There's several folks in the room here from Aruba. Gentleman, tall guy in the back is one of the sales guys I support here. And of course, we do business with High Point all over the country from that perspective. My goal today is to go through some slides at the front to do a setup for a demonstration of what I like to refer to as a automated, secure, zero trust environment for you. And to kind of paint the picture for you, or how I like to say it is, what if you could walk into your network office, your IT office, and simply say, Twitter, configure VLAN 10, and it did it. Or if you said, configure security port policy, shut down IoT devices, and it just did it. The idea here is to get you thinking about what you can do with infrastructure and security without sacrificing one or the other, right? That's kind of the idea, and I'm going to kind of give you some framework of how we do that. And what I'm going to show you today is what we refer to as, and you've heard this buzzword, is a zero trust environment, but automating your network with security policy centralized. Does that make sense? And when I say that, I mean at your edge, switch, your wireless, wired, same consistent security policy, as well as if you had a WAN separation, WAN sort of a boundary, and you had switches on the other side at a remote location, and you wanted that same security policy to be able to be applied there as well, centralized, all automated. So the idea is, if you're the IT responsible party, team, and you build the game or build the stadium, everything else just automatically gets configured from there. That's the idea. Until you maybe plug in something that you've never seen before, or somebody didn't tell you about it on your network. How often does that happen, right? I wish I had a nickel, right, every time that happened. And so we'll tell you how that environment is handled as well. So with that in mind, I'm going to introduce you to what is referred to in the Aruba speak as our edge services platform. Everything connects at the edge, whether it's wired or wireless, and goes somewhere, either laterally, I call it, east-west, or kind of up the riser, right, toward the server or the internet, right, whatever the case might be. So if you think about that, from the perspective of our history, most everybody in the room, and raise your hand if you have kind of known Aruba as the Wi-Fi company, right? Probably pretty common, right? I mean, that was the heritage way back in the day. When I was first at Aruba, it was 14 years ago, took a couple of company hiatuses, came back about 5 years ago. And so lots have changed since then. Now it's kind of an environment of full stack security, switching, wireless, SD-WAN, cloud or on-prem, wherever you choose or decide, or whatever your strategy is, right? Because sometimes your strategy might not be cloud. It might be on-prem, right? You don't want a cloud strategy. So we're architecturally going to show you that you can do it any way you want. The same hardware sort of works in all places. That makes sense? You don't have to have specialized hardware. If you kind of look at the original history of the company back in 2002 to 2022, where we're at today, a lot has changed, obviously. Some of the key things for us, Silver Peak acquisition, key SD-WAN architecture for us that ties into our full cloud-managed portfolio, as well as, I call it the leading-edge Wi-Fi architecture now based on Wi-Fi 6E, which is opened up to 6 gigahertz spectrum for all of North America. And if you saw Tyler McLeod, his Wi-Fi 6E pitch, he's got all Wi-Fi 6E running in the Avalon Center here based on Aruba technology. Okay, so that's kind of what we're going to talk about is no matter how you connect, wired, wireless, on the WAN, single, consistent, centralized policy, automated, okay? That's kind of the idea, and ultimately, your best friend in the sense of kind of taking care of your network for you, okay? So with that in mind, we've gotten accolades over the years. We've been in this Magic Quadrant for 16 years running, have been recognized by Forrester, IDC, Gartner's, you know, they have these critical use cases. We've been recognized by them as well. And so this is just to say, most vendors you look at, you tend to kind of look to see external views of what they think of the company. So we do well in that space, okay? So I'm going to introduce to you, I call it a layered concept architecturally, but you don't deploy or have to deploy it all at once. You might just have one piece of it, right? And I'll give you a good example. You might have everything Extreme or Juniper or something, and you simply want to lock it down with security. You can do that with ClearPass. Works, and you put it in, and now you can literally lock down your entire network with security. The idea is you gain advantage with certain components of Aruba from a switching wireless perspective that you might not get from another vendor that you want to take advantage of. That's kind of the idea. Automation is one of those key things. Centralized policy talking to your infrastructure. We're going to show you that. The other thing I like to point out here is that, again, if you look at it from the perspective of what you're deploying, whether it's on-prem, you're cloud-focused, got branch offices, whatever the case might be, our infrastructure, again, can be managed either on-prem, cloud-averse, don't want to pay that subscription, or you can choose to go the cloud model, whichever way, same hardware. So if you think about it from that perspective, the first kind of layer is the stuff, right, the edge. And then you think about it from the perspective of those pieces are the sort of things I connect to wired and wirelessly. And then we think about it as a layer of what I refer to the software-defined services on top of it. I like to think about you're monitoring the network. You want it to adjust automatically from a policy perspective or authentication, whatever the case might be. And then finally, I call it the AI or artificial intelligence proactively telling you what's wrong, right? That's the first step. And then ultimately, what if then you were given a button that says, you want to fix it now? How many have seen that on their Windows machine? You know, it's like something is broken, something, want to fix it? Sure, I'm not a Windows guy. Click, and it gets fixed. Well, that's kind of where we're taking this process. If you can see the wireless, the wired network, and see what's broken, and you've got enough data points of what is working, and you can see this network that you're monitoring is broken because it's not configured right, give the customer the opportunity to automatically fix it. That's the idea, okay? And so if we take that one step, a lot of people or enterprises, companies want to take advantage of values on top of their infrastructure. I mean, first off, yeah, we connect to a network. Why? To get to a server. Maybe we're going to print something out. We're going to do a Zoom session with a client, whatever the case might be. That's our kind of connectivity method. But we have other things that we want to do. Maybe we want to track assets, or like in this place, not too big a building, but we want to blue dot wayfind our way around in a stadium, in a hospital, whatever the case might be. And we can simply say, I want to go find the operating room. Click a button, shows me the blue dot path to get there, and I just get there, right, from that perspective. So those kind of things I refer to as the services that layer on top of it, right? So when I look at this from the perspective of our architecture, you first have to connect something at the edge, and then if you have a network or an infrastructure that's not protected, then it's basically open, and you've kind of heard all the cybersecurity interesting stories out there. The idea is to be able to protect it and allow your resources to be sort of kept from being hacked into or being compromised. And I look at it from the perspective of you can't protect what you can't see, right? So you ultimately have to be able to have visualization of everything that's plugged in your network and then choose whether you allow it on or not, right? Kind of makes sense. But wouldn't it be great if you could automatically do that? You have your security policy in place for all devices, laptops, IoT, HVAC sensors, you name it, and then let the security policy put it where it belongs, give automatic access to what it should only have access to, and from where to where. That's the idea. And have it do it automatically. Save your people resources for things that they need to take care of with their smart hands, feet, whatever the case might be, okay? And then finally, it would be this concept of, well, how do I want to consume it? Now, you could consume it as I own it, I have the resource, I've deployed it, and I'm doing a perpetual model. After 5, 7 years, there's just a standard end of life, and I refresh, whatever the case might be. Or I can take it as a software as a service model or network as a service model, where I simply want to outsource and have that taken care of for me, but the infrastructure is the same. But now I have it, I call it that overlay that's being watched for me. And I can do sort of whatever bite-sized pieces I want. What if I want the people in the sky watching the high-level stuff and then tell me what's broken, and then I can go take care of it, or I take care of that piece, but they're the ones that are going to fix the heavy lifting, the stuff that's really broken, right? You could do that. So you can kind of take it in whatever pieces you want. The beauty of the model is that you can consume it however you want. And then finally, from the perspective of that process, is that system, I call it, or architectural concept of software as a service, how many do Office 365 today, or something in the cloud? That's sort of like out there taking care of your stuff, right? You have the security wrapped around it, but you're not managing those Exchange servers anymore, right? It's the same concept, but only infrastructure. And so that helps you to accelerate your business, accelerate your ability to do what you do best, whatever your business is. That's kind of the idea, okay? So, first step, connect something. Wi-Fi, wired, whatever the case might be. And architecturally, I'm just going to kind of show you is that there's a lot of buzzwords and a lot of terminology in the Wi-Fi world. There's the radio you connect to from the perspective of your laptop, your phone, whatever the device might be. But then there is additional, we'll call it, things that you might want to take advantage of. A prime example is travelers, right? We go into a hotel. Sometimes you go into a hotel, and they offer you a digital key, right, for your iPhone or your Android, right? You get on your key, you hold it up to your lock, and boom, it opens up your lock, right? That's done through the Zigbee protocol or the 802.15.4 protocol that says, hey, Terry Yekel just checked in. He's got his key. He can now get checked in. The infrastructure I'm talking about all has that built in and integrates with physical buildings, right, if that makes sense. Now, if you think about it, other things that are done are temperature sensors. You want to be able to sense fires in a infrastructure building and then notify it on the map. So when the fire department gets there, they pop up an app, they can see where the problem is, whether it's police or fire, whatever the case might be. Now, there's a couple of thought processes. I can kind of have my campus, my physical infrastructure buildings, but then I might have branches out there, whatever the case might be. Or I might want to have both environments. And from that perspective, you have a single architecture, and you can manage it on-prem, meaning you got kind of the VM management in your sort of data center, or you can manage it via the cloud. Same hardware. You just choose kind of how you want to deploy it. Okay. So that's kind of the process of kind of unifying the Wi-Fi network. Okay. So from the perspective of that, then those APs, laptops, whatever, you got to plug into something. You got your closet and your data center. And again, the concept here is from the perspective of to make it easier for our customers, ideally it'd be nice to have one operating system from edge to core. How many love to get into a CLI of a switch? Ooh, a couple folks, right? That was kind of back in the day, right? You're at the CLI, click, cut, paste, boom, and you're just going to town, right? You're doing that piece. Still valid to do that, but there are ways to make things more efficient, like automation, having that process automatically configure network, still give yourself access, but isn't the first requirement, right? And so from that perspective, having that common operating system, edge to core, is huge. I'm going to show you what I refer to as the easy button. Literally, plug something in, figure it out. And if I have a long cable, I think it's probably in that can bag over there. But if somebody wants to be the guinea pig and brought their laptop with, we'll plug you into their network and we'll figure out who you are. Now that sounds scary because that guy that did that this morning. Yeah. Yeah. So that guy, the guy that did this morning, Joe or whatever, when he did that and he got into the lady's phone, I'm thinking, I'm glad he didn't ask me. I've got a 6-digit code, so it might have took him a little longer, or maybe he wouldn't have got that done. But the idea is see what it is and then make decisions based on that. We're going to show you that process, okay? So, I am talking ClearPass. Oh, and I'm talking ClearPass either on-prem, or I'm talking then the option to have cloud auth in the cloud and integrate with things like Microsoft Azure Intune or Google Management Console or those pieces, right? Through Aruba Central, exactly. That's kind of the idea. And so if I think about, if I go back there, then the idea is that is the gatekeeper, right, from the perspective of security for whatever physical device comes on the network, and it doesn't need to be Aruba, right? I mean, it can be anything because ultimately it touches the network, goes to the security policy manager, yay, nay, yay, put them where you want them, nay, they don't get on. You know, it's sort of on-off, right? Okay, and so we're going to show you that. And then there's a desire sometimes, I call it you have a WAN in the way. It's not in the way, it connects things, right? But it's in the way because how can I ultimately extend my security policy on the other side of a WAN, right? Meaning, got an office, 5 of them, whatever, doesn't really matter how many, but I want that same security policy, whether it's wired or wireless, to be consistent everywhere and to ensure that that device, again, only connects to where I want to and only has access to what I want. But I have to ensure that my SD-WAN architecture can carry that policy across the WAN. Does that make sense? And do it automatically. Because ultimately, if you are the CLI guy, which some folks, gal, that raised your hand, LG, if I wanted that security policy and I wanted that device to connect to this VLAN and it had to go through some other switches, what did I have to do? VLAN trunk, VLAN connect, you know, trunk here, connect here, make sure that VLAN's there, allow VLAN this, make sure the ACLs were on it, and probably a few clicks later and a few copy, cut and paste commands later, I might have gotten it connected over there, right? And then I made sure it worked, right? Well, what if you just automatically connected it, put it where it belonged, and didn't have to do anything? Well, that's what we're going to show you, okay? So again, we take a look at this. We're saying you got your infrastructure, all your users and things. You've got your infrastructure, switching, wireless, and then you've got your branches or multiple locations. And then from Aruba perspective, you can manage it via the cloud, Aruba Central, or on-prem, your choice, okay? Again, to me, flexibility is in the choice of what the customer gets to do. If they like on-prem, they should be able to have that as an option. So everything I'm talking about is that option for you to do that. Then you also have the option to say, gee, I like the idea because I do get some advantages to the cloud. One of the #1 things is visibility and horsepower. The cloud has a lot of horsepower for insights, visibility, automatic sort of advanced information you get, the artificial intelligence you get out of every device that touches your network. Huge value there, okay?
Terry?
Yes?
Do they need to swap out their APs and if they have?
They do not. They can literally take 200 series APs if you're Aruba, and simply bring them into the cloud and take advantage of some of that intelligence, some of that power, and take advantage and simply upgrade to the software version, and now a cloud managed versus on-prem. Exactly. And then I actually have one of my screens I'm going to show you is, well, why would I do that? What advantage? Well, what if I could tell you that anything, and I mean like a HVAC sensor or a wireless projector, anything that touches any piece of Aruba gear is automatically profiled, automatically told what it was, where it is, and then you can, if you choose to, decide, do I allow it on the network or not? That's pretty powerful, right? Because if I didn't see it or didn't know it was there, I can't really do anything with it, right? I didn't know what to do with it because I didn't know it was there. But now if I can see it, and this is kind of the process where you now have control at all points, and you've got a single central point of visibility, okay? Now, is the cloud for everybody? Maybe not. It's got some power. It's got some things that maybe you're not taking advantage or you could take advantage of, so you get to have that sort of choice. But I think of it from the perspective of you can take baby steps, right? Don't eat the whole elephant in one bite because you will choke, right? You're taking little baby steps or little bites will get you there, and you can take advantage, okay? And we're going to show you kind of a brief piece of that. I'm going to show you, I call it simple security automation of your network in the demo that we're going to do. And then I'm going to say or show you that you can simply extend that literally in a zero trust lockdown, carry it across your WAN, and then give you visibility in the cloud if you so choose, if you've chosen that model of management, right, from a cloud perspective, okay? Now, I wish I had a nickel every time I read the word zero trust. I'm sure you guys as well, because you probably have a fair amount of money in a pocket or jar somewhere. But the whole idea is really to never allow anything on your network that you don't know about. Now, I bet there's probably something on your network right now that you don't know is there, unless you have some great visibility tools. Every port's locked down, it doesn't get on for free, but it's not always the case. So then the minimum is you should at least be able to see it and then choose to whether or not you want it on the network, right? But at least you can see it, right? And we're going to kind of show you that process. And then you can kind of choose it from the perspective of, if I have a brand new device, anybody got any Galaxy 11 Wi-Fi 6E tablets? Okay. Brand new device comes on the market. I think Apple just announced that new watch, right, Scott? Brand new Wi-Fi watch. Pretty cool, right? Nobody's ever seen it. Touches an Aruba network, automatically gets profiled. We know what it is. And now, we may not have a security policy for it, so we just drop it into a minimal access VLAN, whatever, until we decide what we want to do with it. Does that make sense? Because ultimately, you have to decide something. You might want to have it internet access only, but then you go from there, okay? So the idea is then to see it and protect it, and that's where I'm going to kind of get into my demo here and show you from the perspective of, wouldn't it be great that anything that touches Aruba automatically categorizes every device on your network and gives you a nice display like that? Oh yeah, we do that. We already have that. It's called Client Insights. You get that from the Cloud AI engine, automatically does that for you. It's just part of your subscription, right? And the key is that now any device that touches your network, I know exactly where it is, where it touched, when it came on the network, and then, oh, by the way, now that I have the visibility, I can make a decision to lock it down if I want, right? Makes sense? And I can lock it down either with a cloud auth or local ClearPass, right? Depends on what I want to do and what power I need or capability I need from that process. So this is probably a good place for me to switch gears, go to my cool screen here. But before I do that, I want to show you one screen. Now, I brought with me some toys. And this is what I brought with. I jammed a whole bunch of stuff into that Pelican case that's laying on the floor there. We roll it around and plug it into customers' networks, and let them be able to kind of see how this works. The idea is this is in my Pelican case, a lot of this. Got a cellular connection to the cloud, so I didn't have to worry about their network here. And then I've got ClearPass, and I've got some other devices that are some interesting use cases that I'll talk about in a second. But the idea is, this is the edge, right? Everything here starts at the edge, whether it's wireless or wired. Something touches it, and you want to either A, see what it is, B, decide if it gets on. Pretty simple, right? And now the third question sometimes happens, do I want to process locally, meaning allow it to go horizontal on that switch, or do I want to send that traffic somewhere else in my network? And I'll give you an interesting use case. What if you had an IP security camera network, there's a bunch in here probably, and you said, I want that video to not be processed locally, but I want to tunnel that traffic to my camera server. It's recording all my cool stuff, my security incidents, whatever. And so I take that unique traffic from my camera and I tunnel it anywhere in the world and drop it off where my camera server is automatically, right? That's a very valid use case. Guest might be another very valid use case, right? The idea is I do not want that traffic locally processed. I want to send it somewhere else. And again, we're going to show you that that can be made by a very simple decision by your central security policy manager. What do you do with the device, with the traffic? Where do you send it? Okay, so we're going to show you that. And so the best thing is always the visual, right? The piece of it. So I'm going to pull up the graphical of this switch and then kind of show you how this works. Okay? Let's do my browser interface here. I'm going to come in here. This is a graphical representation of the switch that's in that box. Okay? So, pretty simple switch. Could be, this happens to be an actual 2930F. Could be a 6100, a 6200, whatever flavor Aruba switch you have. And you can see color-wise, just from a color coordination perspective, there are 3 devices already plugged in. That green, pretty obvious. That's the internet connection, right? Connected to the network. And then there are 2 devices that have a white color right now that are Aruba Infrastructure. Now, I know the Aruba Infrastructure because I hooked them up. And if I go ahead and look here, and I actually hover over one of these, this happens to be an Aruba access point. And there it is. It's an AP that's in that case. And the other device happens to be a UXI sensor. I call it a technician in a box, constantly testing the network 24/7. Something breaks and boop, it notifies me, records it in the cloud, allows me to do packet capture, go figure out what's broken. And then give you kind of a use case example. We had an aircraft customer. He's in Duluth. Problems in Grand Forks. Anybody know how far it is from Duluth to Grand Forks, by the way, if you drove? 4 hours, exactly, 4 hours. Now, that's one way, right, Bubba? So you drive over there, fix something, hopefully, and then drive back. That's 8 hours, right? I said, Dan, don't do that. Let me send you my gizmo. We'll hook it up, test it on your network, and you send it over there and have Bill or Sam or Sally plug it in. So we did that, and he said, hey, it's over there. Yeah, I see it. It's up. It's in the cloud. I can see it. It came online. And he goes, okay, so let's go see. In 5 minutes, we had his problem fixed. And he goes, geez, I need one of these in every one of my offices because guess what? That just saved him 8 hours, much less any time that he would have had to actually spend time troubleshooting. Very simple in his case is he found a co-channel interference issue where users were getting dropped off the network's Wi-Fi. I said, oh yeah, you see that AP right there? That one's on the same channel, overlapping that one right there, and when users try to connect to that one, they have problems and go tick, and they go over again, hey, the Wi-Fi's down. How many times has that happened for you, right? A lot. So that solved his problem, saved him literally, in his case, 8+ hours. So that's the idea for that. So now, you saw my picture. That switch was in the picture. I'm going to go plug in a cable here. Let's see what happens. Somebody said, I want to connect to the network. The port goes active here. Profiles it. Very, very first thing. Remember I said anything that touches an Aruba device, if you have your ClearPass or cloud off, it gets profiled. What is it? Anybody see what that was profiled as? A Cisco VoIP phone, right? And we got a bunch of information from that phone, right? We took that information, we now have that in our database, and now in our security policy we can decide what do we want to do with that phone. Okay, well, one of the most obvious things is we want to put it on the voice VLAN, right? Makes sense. We apply some quality of service to it because it's a VoIP phone, right? And then we want to ensure that maybe it only has access to the UCS server, right? Because that's really all a VoIP phone needs to talk to, right? In the sense of, you know, when it gets its software, right? That kind of thing, right? From that perspective. But what usually happens after you have a VoIP phone plugged in the network? Anybody? Some device or somebody says, hey, there's a port on that phone, I'm going to plug something into it, right? And so the first thing we did, though, is before we did anything, we said, A, I'm going to hit my security policy checker, I profiled it, then I allow or don't allow it on the network. And at the same time, this port now, the red port, has a config on it. It didn't before. So ClearPass got the request, this device wants to get on the network, authenticates, and we send the configuration down to the switch port. Now, what would normally happen if you're the network infrastructure folks? What would you have to do? Yep, or somebody moves something, or I undo that config and go put it on somewhere else. So instead of doing that, we just tested it first in your lab, right, whatever. We know that every time we plug in a phone, it's going to put it on the right voice VLAN, get the right configuration, the right quality service, and now if I plug that phone in anywhere in my network, it gets the same policy. Boom, boom, boom. 100 times out of 100, okay? That's automated security, right, on the network. And then we say, well, now we're going to plug in the device behind it. Okay, so let's do that. That happens. You can do both if you choose. Okay, in this case, that is a really dumb phone. It's a really old one. That's a 7960, probably 15-year vintage phone. It doesn't have a supplicant on it. So I had to do MAC auth and make sure that there was no MAC spoofing. I've got that in the service policy, et cetera. Now, if it actually had a username password, right? Some phones do, right? Some smarter phones, you know, have the ability to have a username password that would go in against a back-end Active Directory database, right? Or Intune, right, in the cloud. Then that would have been Mac plus 802.1x. So you could absolutely do both, right? In this case, it just happens to be a dumb device, okay? So in that case, I didn't do 802.1x. And then if I take and plug my magic cable over here into this device, now we're going to see something else happen, and it instantly, oh, by the way, this request hit that switch, went across the 4G to Verizon, out to California, profiled it, and the result came back. That's how fast that was, right? That went halfway across the country. So that's pretty fast, right? From a, you know, wherever your intelligence security policy might be, right? From that perspective. And so now, based on that, what did it profile that device as? Anybody see? Windows, right? But something very interesting, you can kind of read it on the screen, but I usually like to walk through people. It put it in a role, and if you know anything about Aruba, you know we are a role-based network company. What does that mean? It means that the role construct for anything in Aruba is a who, what, where, why, when sort of gathering of information and deciding almost three-dimensionally what entity just connected or happened on the network. Now, what happened is when Josh refreshed the browser, and what did it do? It popped up a captive portal. Now, anybody know anything about a captive portal means, are you on the network yet? You're not, right? You are needing to ask for some information, right? And so basically, that captive portal can be served up from ClearPass. And let's say Josh happens to be the keeper of the network, and maybe he's going to sponsor my meeting that day. So I would put my information, and then his, as the sponsor, it would hit his email. He would go, oh, yeah, Terry's here. Click OK. I get the authorization. I get on the network. And now I go out of captive portal mode and go onto the network where the service policy allows me. That makes sense? Okay. So from that perspective now, on that port of the switch, there are two roles. There is the phone role, right? The original role for the phone. And then there is the laptop role that's in captive portal mode. And then once it did it.
It's got a 30-second countdown timer.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Okay. So now it's going through the process. And did you give it my info? Oh. Oh, okay. There it is. Yeah, it's perfect. Yeah, now see what it did? It said, now it changed it from to a guest BYOD role just by going through the sponsorship process, and now literally it put it in a guest BYOD role. Now, again, you guys can get as sophisticated or as simple as you want, right? From that perspective now, what it did is it now said you were captive. Now you get where you're going based on the security policy. And I configured nothing. It was already in the process, right? So now let's imagine I had 50 switches, and all you do is simply go turn on the switch, AAA, point to ClearPass, the security policy is already done, and I'm ready to go, right? I only have to configure it one place, test it one place, and I enable it everywhere I go. Does that kind of make sense? Because now what I've just done is created a full zero trust model. Oh, and by the way, if I did this, and I'll end it here, is what do people usually do when they can't get on the network or it doesn't work? Maybe this port works. Usually, right? I mean, it happens all the time. So if I go this and I go, unplug that port, magically goes, that config is gone now off that switch. Doesn't exist. And then if I go here and plug it in, power over Ethernet, turns on that phone, takes a second or so for the phone to kick in, and it goes, whoop, profile. Already went through the process before, and now I've got two devices, two roles on that port, and I'm right where went through the same process I did before, and now I literally have that same policy just in a different port. Automatically did it, okay? So that's the model or architecture we think people probably would take advantage of from that whole kind of zero trust automation, any policy, any device, and it's 100% consistent all this at the same time. So hopefully it makes sense. We're going to kind of haul our toys back to our booth or whatever, and if you have questions, we can simply answer or go deeper if you'd like. And again, High Point, by the way, has this running at the show here. Tyler, he's got that all set up here. They do this all the time for customers. They're really, really good at it. Okay? I appreciate it.